Thank you, Miranda, and thank you so much for having me. I am so thrilled to be here to talk to you guys tonight. Like Miranda said, I am Juliana Willems. My pronouns are she, her. I am a trainer in the Washington, D.C. area. I run a small private training company. We work with everything from basic manners and puppies to reactivity, aggression, fear stuff. And what's been really amazing about the pandemic is that we've been reaching people all over the country too, because we offer virtual training. So that's been really amazing to connect with so many people through social media and being able to help dogs and their owners virtually. And I've done many seminars prior to COVID, but COVID is what brought me digital finally, like everyone else. And I just love and adore getting to reach so many people through online presentations because I can reach so many more of you. So thank you for being here. A quick housekeeping thing about questions. I love questions. Like Miranda said, please put them in the chat. I do ask that you mostly stick to questions about the content and avoid my dog questions because those can usually be very lengthy and maybe not relevant to other attendees. So if you can think to put something about maybe phrase it in a more general way, like, well, what about when a dog does, because then I'll be able to answer you. But otherwise, I'll have my contact information at the end and you can email me with your personal question about your dog. So I'll go ahead and share my screen, hopefully, and we'll get started into this presentation. I'm hoping to go for about 45 minutes today. And that way we'll have time for questions at the end and get you guys out right at 8, hopefully. I'm also going to very quickly pull up the chat box so that I have it just to see what you guys are saying. All right, wonderful. Okay, so I am talking today about simple solutions to common problems. So in the dog world, we really try to stress to owners that there's no such thing as a quick fix or kind of like overnight progress. But there's a little caveat to that, and that is something called management. So, let's see. Oh, we're not wanting to. Oh, okay. We'll just click. So my simple solution that I'm going to talk about tonight is management. I'm going to talk about what exactly management is, but just know that management is one of my favorite training tools because exactly like the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. There is so much value in management, which again, we'll get into. But really the simple solutions that I'm going to be talking about tonight are things that don't typically involve training, and they're about changing the environment. And the blanket term for that is going to be management. So what is management exactly? Now, I don't think there's really a technical definition for management or like an official one or scientific, which is, I really love the science, but I don't know if we've agreed on really an official definition. But to me, management means changing the environment to decrease the likelihood that a behavior occurs. And I think when I was looking online for a definition, there was a lot of wording around the word controlling the environment. But for me, I feel like management, we're trying to, yes, we might be preventing a problem, but a lot of people implement management to change a problem behavior or stop a problem behavior. So in that case, you would really be having to make a change in the environment from what it currently is, because clearly whatever you had to begin with was allowing your dog to rehearse this unwanted behavior. So again, management does not require prior training. That's why we love it so much. It is really helpful. It is really, anyone can do it. And now the asterisk here is that some scenarios will be helpful to practice ahead of time. You'll see what I'm talking about. And so they don't necessarily require your dogs to have specific skills, but they would be helpful if everyone kind of knew the routine ahead of time instead of only using it in the challenging scenario. So you'll see what I'm talking about. So What's really important to understand is that really management does not address the underlying reason for the behavior. It's essentially avoiding the problem. It is distracting your dog or avoiding the scenario where the problem behavior occurs. So, if your dog were to get back into that scenario where the problem behavior happened, it's not necessarily that their behavior would be different. They're not learning an appropriate replacement behavior. The training is not happening. This is just really avoiding the problem. And the thing is, management works differently for everyone, meaning people rely on it in totally different ways. You're going to have people, and that's actually kind of the interesting thing is that people there's a lot of differing opinions on management because it comes down to what you as a dog owner want. I will tell you that in my home, at the end of a long day of training dogs, I really like to manage my own dog because I don't have the energy to put into training. So I am perfectly happy managing her environment to get better behavior. Now, some other people argue that, well, management is, you know, y- I don't even want to say it, but they'll be like, oh, management's such a cop out, or you're just avoiding the problem. And it's like, yes, I sure am. And it's working great for me. So you really have to think about kind of your dog's needs, your needs as an individual or as a family. Everyone is different about how much they use management, like management, and implement management. And so it's not a cure all. Like I said, it does not address the underlying reason for the behavior. It doesn't really teach your dog what to do instead of the unwanted behavior, but it can be extremely effective in changing the behavior or preventing it and not seeing the problem behavior with where a lot of us, average dog owners, we are perfectly fine. We want our dogs to start barking. So if we have a few management solutions in place that stop the barking, that's great. I don't, like, I think it really, really can be very effective and it can give you that kind of magic wand solution that you might not have realized existed. And even if you are doing heavy training or you are hoping to change behavior, management is an essential part of changing that behavior. And it's an essential part of a training plan because it's extremely important when you're trying to change behavior that your dog doesn't have the opportunity to continuously rehearse the unwanted behavior. Every time your dog does an unwanted behavior, they are practicing it. They're getting reinforced for it for some way because no behavior happens for no reason. And ultimately, if you're training half the time and the other half the time the dog is practicing the behavior, you're not going to be making as quick progress. Or you might be even backtracking in your progress. And you would be making such better progress if you were training for this portion of the time and then managing and preventing the behavior the rest of the time. And so, no matter what behavior I'm really working on, I mean, it could be, something as benign as like jumping on guests or something as severe as biting strangers. I'm going to use management. I'm going to recommend management to prevent the rehearsal of the unwanted behavior for almost every single case that I see. It's going to look different for everybody. The extent of it is going to be different depending on each individual client, but it's a very, very critical part of changing behavior. And the thing about management and the reason that it helps us with the science is because reinforcement drives behavior, meaning when you reinforce a behavior, you're going to see more of it. And it looks like this. So you have a behavior and you add something good. So we call it in the dog science world reinforcement. Most people call it a reward. It could be food, petting, attention, play, stealing something off the counter that's really tasty, access to a sniff on walks. Whatever good thing happens after the behavior, you're going to see an increase in the behavior. That's the behavior science around it. Behavior is reinforced and you see more of it. So the thing is, if you have management in place and you're not seeing the behavior, that means the behavior is not being reinforced. And that means that you will not see an overall increase in the behavior, in that unwanted behavior. And that's really, really important. So again, whether you're working on a training plan where you are really trying to improve a specific behavior, or you're kind of just looking for an easy solution to something that you don't really feel like doing much training for, it's really important to understand that in order for that behavior to not go reinforced and keep happening, we have to prevent it in some way. And that's management. So, behavior issues we're going to discuss today. So, this again is where I kind of pull out my magic wand and I say, hey, I'm going to give you stuff that should theoretically give you pretty quick and easy solutions to stop the rehearsal of these behaviors. So, we're going to talk about barking at noises in the house or the apartment, barking out the windows of the home, barking on walks, whether that's at dogs or people, jumping on your guests, the dog's behavior around guests, counter surfing, and chewing. I picked these because obviously they're super common problems. And again, we've got pretty easy solutions for them. All right, here's if you have a noise sensitive dog. This is familiar to all of you. For a beautiful day where you, God forbid, have the door open, you know, hearing those noises can really cause a lot of reactivity for our dogs. And so what's most important to prevent the behavior is to prevent your dog from hearing the trigger, right? So anytime we want to eliminate the barking at the noise, we have to figure out, well, how do we eliminate basically the noise? Now, a really good option for this is a sound machine. And what's really interesting, just a quick kind of note about this presentation. I've been doing this stuff for so long that the management solutions are like, I don't even think about them anymore. They're like a no-brainer. Like, yeah, of course, like turn the radio on, turn the TV on. But time after time with my clients, they'll say things to me like, oh, I didn't think of that, and because from a professional standpoint, this is what I deal with all day. And I see people implement it and it helps so much. But you guys don't necessarily have the same perspective of thinking in this way. So I apologize if any of them seem simple or something you've already tried. But for a lot of you, I think you'll realize like, oh, again, like, wow, didn't realize that. Oh, that's so simple. You're right. Duh, let's just do that. So a noise machine or playing some type of noise when near some type of good noise. So again, like have the TV playing or the radio playing, turn Alexa on, a white noise machine near the source of the noise can be really helpful. So this is a picture of an apartment there's the noise machine on that stand right there. You can get them super cheap at Amazon. It's important to put it near the source of the noise. So again, usually like for apartment dogs near the front door, or if it's a house, like maybe near the street side of the house, and drown out some of those noises. Because again, you're not teaching your dog to not bark at the noise. We're just trying to get rid of the noise. And then restricting access to the trigger area. So this is an example of a baby gate in a home. And I specifically picked this kind of bizarre, unrelatable photo because it's a long hallway. And for people who like, I've been to a couple of clients where the apartment has a bit of a hallway near the front before the front door, and the dog is constantly just charging the front door to get to the noises. Put up a gate, restrict access to the noises so that they're not hearing them and they're not practicing barking at them, running towards them, charging at them. So distracting with a chew or a Kong. If there's a particularly noisy time of day, again, apartment dwellers, people coming home from work, back when we came home from work, or if you're at a house and it's when, again, the kids get off the school bus, back when kids used to go to school. If you have a particularly loud part of the day, giving your dog something to do can be really helpful to prevent them from noticing the noises and barking at them. And then, of course, closing windows and doors. Sadly, this is something I had to do today because that little barky chihuahua you just saw is not used to having the doors open on a beautiful 70-degree day. So I was ambitious and thought maybe she could handle it, but the noises were just too much. And there were other things I could have done, but I just chose to close the door and not let her rehearse that behavior. And then I'll come up with something else to do next time. But of course, that's always the option. It's always an option to close the windows. So that was barking at noises. This is going to be barking out the window at visuals. And this is something that one is extremely critical in anytime you have a reactive dog or a dog who, reactivity. If you deal with reactivity outside of the home, you'd be surprised how much barking can inside the home can contribute. So decreasing that barking, managing, taking away those triggers inside the home is super important. So my number one favorite thing for this, window film. I actually did this in my own apartment. So that top picture is Lola. Literally snapped that this afternoon. You'll see the door is closed, but I'm lucky because she's so little. So I only have to do the bottom portion, but that's actually why I really like window film, because it's unlikely that you'll have to do the whole window. And even if you do, the light still comes through. But a lot of my clients will say, oh, I'll just close the shades. And of course that's an option, but wouldn't it be nice to be able to keep the shades open? So window film is fantastic. You can find it on Amazon. It's like $20 and you literally just, you have to use like soapy water or something. I was very intimidated by it. I didn't do it for a long time. So glad I did. Jen is saying, if you buy cling film, don't make the mistake of buying one that has a design that the dog can see through. Yes, we definitely want to make sure that it is effective. And this like kind of solid translucent one is really helpful. So really quick, and I think this is a helpful question. Laura asks, is a dog retreating considered reactivity or only barking? So, I mean, reactivity is really just a reaction to a trigger, right? So if your dog is finding something scary enough that they're retreating, it's not the typical version of reactivity, but again, reactivity is just an overreaction to a trigger. So when I talk about reactivity, I am mostly, and I apologize for not defining it, that's definitely important to define. Reactivity is typically barking, lunging, growling, those big behaviors that we see, and we see it at noises, kind of running and charging, or out the window, which is what I'm talking about here. So thank you, Laura, for asking that clarification. So again, window film, super important, super easy, big game changer. I tell people anecdotally, I think our window film cut Lola's barking down like 90% because she could see into the courtyard and she would just bark at everyone. And again, a little bit of a lazy dog owner. And so it works great for us to manage. I do some training, but like the management has just been great. She's happy, I'm happy, and it works really well for us. Okay. All right. So restrict access to trigger areas, just like with the noises. If you have a dog who barks at a particular part of the house, just close the door that gives them access to that. Put up a gate. This can be really, really effective. If you have a way to restrict access, just don't let them near the part where they can see the window, see out the door. Close the blinds. Like I said, a lot of my clients tell me that they do this, which is perfectly fine. Especially if it's not an all the time type thing. Your dog's just feeling, a little bit barkier one day, or it's busier outside than usual. You can just go ahead and close the blinds. And then same thing with noises. You can distract with a chew or a Kong. And this would be basically keeping them away from the window and not noticing what's outside. So again, none of this stuff is teaching our dogs how to see things and behave nicely, right? This is total avoidance, but it works. Oh, sorry guys. Okay. All right. So barking on walks. So this is, and to define this would look like a dog who barks at other dogs or people. It could be out of fear, it could be out of excitement, whatever. For whatever reason, these are going to be some solutions for um, these are going to be some solutions for your dog barking on walks. So avoiding triggers, and again, another piece to a training plan for a dog who is reactive on leash. Again, barking, lunging, pulling, growling, whatever. These are critical because you aren't going to be able to train around every single trigger, and you don't want your dog rehearsing the barking and the reacting. So you can hide behind cars, trash cans, anything else you can find. This is a picture of Lola and I hiding between cars. And there's actually, when you start to look for it and scan your environment, you start to realize there are a lot of options for places to hide. And it can be helpful while you're walking to be like, okay, I see that trash can over there we can duck behind. I see, that dumpster over there. I see that car over there. Those can be easy things to look for on your walk so that you can literally hide. Changing your walking route. So instead of going on a route where you're going to see a lot of people, you're going to go in somewhere, maybe walking in the alley or in parking lots where you're unlikely to run into somebody. Again, this is technically management because you're not teaching your dog how to not bark at other dogs. You're simply avoiding it, which again, perfectly fine and can be really, really helpful for a lot of dogs, especially if you're working on reactivity. So dropping high value treats on the ground for your dog to look for and eat. Now, there are going to be some times when if you do a treat scatter in the right way, it could be a little bit of what we call counter conditioning to help with the reactivity. I apologize, I just can't really go much more into that, but counter conditioning is one thing that is important in the training process with reactive behaviors on leash. And so sometimes treat scatters can be really helpful in terms of like reaching you towards your goal. But most of the time, it's a management technique that prevents your dog from reacting or prevents them from seeing the trigger that they might react to. And also, to define another term, I use trigger a lot, and that is just any stimuli that causes a reaction from your dog. Could cause barking, lunging, growling. It could cause your dog to hide and run away. Trigger is just something that your dog reacts to. So this is a video of Lola and I practicing basically a little bit of a treat scatter. So I'm going to keep her distracted. We're not going to actually see a trigger go by, but just pretend like there's a trigger walking past on the sidewalk. So we walk off the sidewalk quite a bit. And then what's important here is I have her back to the potential trigger and I'm just feeding her. So she's like in treat blackout. She's just like, I'm just focused on finding these treats. Like she wasn't looking around at all. And so I was able to keep her occupied on that while the potential trigger went by. Really good solution. It also involves a little bit of sniffing and eating, both of which can help calm dogs. All right. So then also luring your dog past a trigger. Now, again, I'll talk about this in the next slide. So a lure means to basically use a treat to move your dog where you want them. The dog isn't really responding to a cue or they're not making the choice to do this behavior. They're really just following a treat right in front of their nose. And so luring your dog past a trigger by holding a treat in your hand and putting that treat right on their nose can help get them past the trigger, basically with either without them noticing or without them practicing the barking because they don't look away because they're too focused on the food. So it's, again, technically falls under the category of management because you're not really teaching them how to cope. You're more just preventing the behavior because you're kind of avoiding it because you're not letting them look at it. So here's Lola. Apologize, it's a little bit far away, but you'll kind of see. So see how my nose my hand has the treat in it, and I'm putting it right on her nose and luring her past the dog. So I didn't even give her a chance. I would have gone even further down if I really thought she was going to react, but I didn't even give her a chance to look at the dog because I just lured her right past it. And this can be a really, really helpful solution if to implement. And the thing about management is a lot of times we're weaving it into training. So you might have a dog who barks at other dogs on walks. You might see a dog, do some training around it, proactive, teaching your dog how to make better choices around the other dog. But then the next dog you see, oh, I'm going to hide for this one. We're going to take a break. And then the next one, oh, we're going to lure past this one. Oh, this one looks like we can train. So management can be really, really helpful for giving you a really much needed break when you're out on walks and helping your dog not go over threshold, and then also not trigger stack through the walk so that they're seeing a dog and a dog and a dog. And then by the fourth dog you see, they explode. That's the concept of trigger stacking, where every time they see something, it just gets harder and harder. So it's really helpful to be able to give them a break. Excuse me. Okay. So we're going to talk about management. We're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to go back inside, and we're going to talk about management for when your dog jumps on your guests. And again, kind of a foreign concept. Who's been having guests lately, right? Wow. But it's going to be all the more reason to have a plan for when you do start having guests over again. So one really easy management solution, if your dog like totally just crazy up at the front door, jumping on people, uncontrollable, so excited, is to just put your dog in another room or put them in a crate. Just get them out of the equation altogether. So here's a video of this. And you'll also get to see the whole process from the doorbell to me getting the door for the guest. So just put them quickly out back, gave them a treat scatter. They were easy to get back there and easy to occupy. And I got my guest. So that is an example of a sequence or routine that would be helpful to rehearse ahead of time so that your dog knows kind of, one, you know the drill of where are the treats, where am I going to put the dog? And the dog kind of knows the drill of, you can pair a cue with it, like, oh, let's go to your room or let's go out back or something like that. And so it can be really helpful to have that kind of in your muscle memory, because when the doorbell rings, it's like, like, oh no, like, where are the treats? Where are the dogs? The dogs are barking. So that's a really helpful one to prepare ahead of time and know the drill, right? Set yourself up for success. Okay, so you can put your dog in another room or a crate. You can put your dog behind a baby gate. This is a pretty simple one. Again, not teaching your dog how to be appropriate at the front door with guests. It is just taking them out of the equation so you don't have to worry about them. So if you can throw your dog behind, I always say like throw your dog, pull over. If you can gently put your dog behind a baby gate, that can just get them out of the picture. They might be leaping from behind the gate or, crying a little bit, but it's still better than kind of jumping on your guests. So really easy solution. And then some people choose to have their dog on leash at the front door. It gives you a little bit more control. It prevents them from being able to totally leap at your guests. They can stay closer to you. So a lot of people choose to do this as well. Again, the nice thing about a lot of management is also, not only does it prevent the rehearsal of the unwanted behavior, it increases the chances that your dog makes good choices. And then if you are going to decide to do training, then you're way more likely to have good behaviors to reinforce. So that's another big reason why management is important. And then dropping treats on the ground or feeding treats really low. So this is where you're basically going to use your food to put your dog where you want them. And so here's a video of this. Now it's just me walking in, but it would be the same thing with your guests. And you'll see I use a treat scatter to basically get the dog totally disengaged from me and focused on something else. I didn't give a cue. I didn't ask for anything before. I didn't wait for any good behavior before I did the treat scatter. I simply threw treats and said, you go think about that while I come in the door. So again, no training. There's no criteria here. I'm just managing because I'm preventing her. I'm not even giving her the chance to jump on me. So by doing the treat scatter, I was able to buy myself some time. I gave her something else to focus on. She was far away from me. She was sniffing. She was focused on something else. Great option. So just to review, put your dog in another room, behind a baby gate, keep them on leash, or just use a ton of treats on the ground to prevent them from jumping up. All good options depending on your own dog. So once your guests are in the house, or maybe in COVID land, COVID world, your guests are in the backyard with you. Maybe you have a dog who loves other dogs so much. I mean, other people so much, and they just get so excited with guests, and they're like really hard to be around, and so they really can be really challenging if you're trying to have a nice time with your guests. So management, again, preventing them from. Some examples would be like if they're really like jumping on your guests, or they're barking, or they're wanting to like lick your guests a lot, which people don't always like. I'm wanting to get in your guest's lap all the time. There's a lot of things that dogs can do when they can't settle, when they're too excited. And the best solution, or one of the best solutions management wise for this, is to just give them something else to do to distract them while your guests are there. So I really like this picture because this is like, it looks almost like a social setting. People are just outside and enjoying themselves. And the dog is just fully interested in the bone that he has, which is great. So especially if you know that they're going to be pretty hyped up, like they're young, or if they're a little bit nervous, like kind of having maybe a bully stick ready. Your guest walks in, you give your dog the bully stick, and the dog goes and decompresses and eats that and entertains themselves. Or back to that original solution, just putting them in another room or crate, getting them out of the way, at least initially until they settle, or the whole time. That's totally fine too. A lot of my reactivity or fear aggression clients who their dogs are uncomfortable around strangers, there's a bite risk around strangers. The dog just gets well exercised during the day, goes into their crate with a big Kong in the evening when the guests come over, doesn't even realize the guests are over. The white noise machine is going, the crate is comfortable, the dog just snoozes the whole time, and the dog just the issue is totally avoided. Okay, counter surfing. So this is one. So counter surfing, to define it, is when dogs jump up with their front paws on the counter or the coffee table or the kitchen table, and they steal your food, basically, or other things, but most commonly they steal food. And the thing about counter surfing, so counter surfing is one of the number one behaviors that even if you do want to do training and you're ready to train so much to work on counter surfing, you're going to have to manage a lot, because with counter surfing, with most behaviors, but we know reinforcement drives behavior. Well, guess what? Your dog tries 99 times to jump up on the counter and you catch them. No win, no win. The 100th time, they grab the turkey sandwich off on the plate and they're like, man, that was so worth those 99 times I tried. It was so worth it. So I'm going to try even more times next time. So management is critical in curbing this behavior, preventing it, not getting your dog to have a win. So no matter what, you have to implement management with counter surfing. A lot of times with dogs under the age of like 2, you're going to have this management in place until they don't have the behavior in their repertoire anymore. And that's the thing about management. Again, a little kind of sidebar about it is that when dogs don't rehearse behaviors and they don't get practice, a lot of times those behaviors can go kind of further in the back of their brain and of choices to do, and other behaviors get reinforced and happen and get practiced that the dog will start to choose from instead. So while management does not teach your dog how to necessarily ignore, for example, um, food on the counter. If you spend 2 years managing and then you slowly kind of take the management away, a lot of times your dog is like, they don't even realize counter surfing is an option because they spent so much of their time never ever doing the behavior. So that's another big reason for management. Another time that this happened, I had a client who built a new deck, and she had a very reactive dog who would react to people. And going by the deck, she covered the deck for months. It was great. The dog was very calm on the deck. He learned to just chill. And then she slowly started taking the boards away, and the dog remained chill because he just hadn't practiced the behavior. He had a new association with the deck that didn't involve charging and chasing people. So, another big benefit. So, counter surfing, let's see. Okay. So keep the counters empty and the cabinets closed. So a lot of times, changing our dog's behaviors, unfortunately, for better or worse, includes changing our human behaviors. So a form of management is keeping stuff off the counters because that means that there will be no temptation. And if your dog does jump up, they can't get any wins. So again, management, not teaching them to not jump up, but it makes sure that if they do jump up, they don't get any wins and there's less temptation for jumping up because they don't smell stuff. Restrict access via tethering. So again, a really good solution for young puppies if they're constantly jumping on the counter, just kind of looping their leash through a kitchen chair, giving them a nice Kong, a bone, a cozy bed to do away from the counter can be a really good option because they physically cannot reach the counter. And then restricting access to the kitchen via gates. So another common solution where people just don't let their dog in the kitchen. Great. Or that way, maybe you don't let them in the kitchen. And the 10 minutes a day that you do let them in the kitchen, you're rewarding them for being on a mat. You're giving them that alternative behavior to choose so that then when they're in the kitchen, they're only making good choices. Really important. All right. So our last one is chewing. And this is one where management, especially for dogs under the age of like a year and a half. I'm sorry, but if your dog goes after your shoes and chews them up, that's a little bit more of your fault, unfortunately, than your dog's fault, because we should have used a little bit more management because they're just kind of expressing a really natural need. And if we don't want them to chew something up, then we have to put it away. So management options for this, closing doors to rooms and closets. Like a lot of times, you hear of young dogs running into like the kids' room and grabbing stuffed animals and really getting into trouble there. And it's like, okay, just close the doors, right? Easy peasy, just close the doors. Obviously picking up items that you don't want chewed. Oh, these are my really nice glasses. Let me not leave them out. Or, oh, I really love this pair of shoes. Let's not even let it happen. Restrict access to the chewing areas. So like if there's a particular carpet that they chew on or furniture, you can just close the door to that room, use gates, pens, stuff like that. Most importantly, this is less of a management issue. Actually, this isn't really management at all, but I just had to say it with chewing. You absolutely have to make sure that your dog is getting plenty of appropriate chewing outlets, because most of the time with chewing, if your dog is chewing inappropriate items or they're getting into a lot of trouble with stuff that you don't want them to be getting into trouble for, that's like they're like, hello, I have a need that's met, and it's not, that's not being met. So if you don't give me something to chew on, I'm going to find something to chew on. So I suppose it actually is considered management because you're giving them something better to do. You're not necessarily teaching them not to chew other stuff. But that's the thing about chewing is your dog just has a need. And so if you can fill that need appropriately, you don't have to teach them, hey, don't chew this stuff, chew this instead. They're just naturally going to make much better choices because they have appropriate outlets. So if you didn't see your behavior in this webinar that you were hoping to hear about, you kind of have the picture now of what you need to know to consider management for yourself. So When does the behavior occur? And what can you change in the environment to decrease the chances that the behavior happens? Big example of this, dogs getting into the trash, right? Well, what can we do there? Get a covered trash can. Dog pulling toilet paper roll, getting into the toilet paper and pulling that off. What do we do there? Close the bathroom door. So there's a lot of options that you just have to think about. When is the behavior happening and what can you change in the environment to decrease that behavior? Takeaways from this: management is intended to decrease the occurrence of a behavior. It's all it is. It is not training, but it can be easier than training. So management will not solve the problem, but it has the potential to make your life a lot easier without a lot of effort. And effective management is dependent on your specific dog, your environment, and the behavior challenge that you're experiencing. Not all management's going to look the same. You might not use management as much as somebody else does. You might use it way more. It is totally up to the individual. All right. Let me see if I can. Oh. All right. So this is my contact information. So I really kind of flew through that. I'll let you guys take a picture of this if you would like, and then I'll stop sharing my screen. Nobody has put any questions in the chat, so it seems like you guys might not have any, but feel free to put them in. We've got plenty of time. So if you have any questions in the chat, you can go ahead and leave those there. Or Miranda, if you thought of anything while I was doing that, feel free to ask away.
Awesome. Thanks, Juliana. Yeah, definitely. Please pop some questions in there if you have them. Just a few last notes. Again, I will send out the presentation recording tomorrow so that everybody has that. If you are so inclined, we are a nonprofit. We would love it if anybody would like to make a donation. We would also love any reviews you might want to put out on Google or Nextdoor or Facebook to let people know what we're doing. Please let folks know we're out here. We're going to keep offering these free webinars. So we want to try and make sure we get information to as many people as possible. And all of these webinars are available for free on YouTube after they get posted. So if you want to do training sessions, you can reach out to Juliana. You can reach out to us. So we have those things available. And again, if you do have a reactive dog, please join our reactive dog group that meets every other week. If you would like some cool merchandise, we have awesome t-shirts. They're really cool. So you can order those, and we have hoodies and things like that as well. But we'd love for you to engage with us on social media, hang out with us, do all that kind of thing. So it looks like Nicole also says that the t-shirts are cool. She's right. What type of script would you give to clients who may not be as inclined to provide legal chew toys because their previous dogs did not chew this much?
That's such an interesting question, Maya. Well, if they were coming to me with the issue of chewing, I would try to make it very clear that if your dog is chewing this much, then they definitely have a need for chewing. And I think, maybe if they're not coming to us for chewing, but we're just trying to teach them the importance of chewing, then, a little bit of education on dogs' needs and making sure that they understand how helpful and important enrichment can be. And then if there's like any other issues like, oh, I don't like these types of chews or these, got a lot of options out there. So being really flexible with the client too is also important, I think.
Yeah, so we got a couple comments in here. One, that some people feel as if chew toys are reinforcing. And then from Kathy, we often hear from adopters that the dog should somehow know that it shouldn't chew on shoes or dart out the door or any of these other things.
Well, and this is totally, this is where, the human world and the dog world, we just totally butt heads, because again, these poor dogs, when they're making these choices to chew on stuff or to, like you said, like dart out the door, they're like, oh, freedom. Like, okay, cool. I'll go there. Like, oh, this is something that feels good in my mouth and I really have a need to chew. Like, of course they're going to do it. And so I think, again, this is where education goes such a long way in making sure people understand dog needs do not match human needs, or dog needs do not necessarily match human world a lot of the times as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Oh, totally, Kathy. So Kathy says, to counter this, I use the comparison of how we have to learn when we visit a new country. Yes, I wish every dog owner could be plopped into a country where they don't know the language, they don't know the customs, they don't know anything. And then maybe we would all have a little bit more empathy about our poor dogs and what they have to go through.
What do you do if your dog is just not as interested in the treats or toys as much as whatever they're preferring to do? Just keep trying new ones?
That's a really good question, Laura. Thank you. So I think it's really important to get to know your individual dog and really get curious about what, if you're like, what are they finding to get into trouble with? Like if they're constantly going after pillows or, the kids' stuffed animals and you're offering them like hard plastic chews, like they're telling you they like to destroy fluffy things. So that can be really helpful. And then also, maybe, you try something new, different types of chews. Unfortunately, this is where like trial and error, it can get a little expensive because you're like, this one? They're like, nah, like this one? Nah. But I definitely think, look at your dog, look at what they seem to like and how can you replicate that in I call it legal way, like what legal chew can we give them?
Well, and one other thing to think about is whether it's that individual thing or whether maybe you've set up a situation where they're playing with that thing because they know it's not legal and they want your attention. So
Right.
for example, my dog Nina never chews on shoes unless I am on a Zoom call and she is bored and she wants me to pay attention to her. And so what I need to know is that it's not really about the shoes, it's that she's trying to get my attention some way she thinks she will. And so I need to meet the need ahead of time by giving her something else to do. So if you're finding a lot of the time that like your puppy has something that they don't want to give up for something else, even though you've got a good thing for them, it might be that they know they're going to get your attention that way. And so we have to manage ahead by knowing that if given the opportunity, they will use that to get your attention. So sometimes we have to remember that we have opposable thumbs and big brains and that we're smarter than our dogs and figure out how to kind of outsmart them in the beginning.
And Miranda, you bring up such a good point too, that all behavior has a function. And so what I actually didn't mention and what I think is really important when it comes to management is like if we're restricting our dog's ability to perform a behavior, a quote unquote bad behavior, an unwanted behavior, is there a function of that behavior that then they'll be lacking? Like some things there will be like, or there won't be, like alarm barking and reactivity and stuff like that. Like if we eliminate that, they're not going to be like, man, I sure wish I had outlets to bark at. Well, they might, who knows, but it would be less so than things like restricting access to chewing or like digging too is another one where if we just were like, no, restrict access to the yard and they're like really wanting to dig, just eliminating the option for that, the function of that behavior could be difficult. So keeping in mind, where can I meet that need somewhere else?
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out for this. We really appreciate it. I know folks are coming from different time zones. Like I said, this recording will go out tomorrow. And a huge thanks again to Juliana. She put her contact information up and it'll be included with the video on the link as well. Juliana didn't mention this, but she's actually on the Karen Pryor Academy staff. She's on faculty with them. And last year you may have seen her hosting a weekly podcast with Ken Ramirez. No big deal. So she's kind of great. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to her. She has a great Instagram also at JW Dog Training. And we also have a somewhat great Instagram. It's just not quite as fancy, but definitely reach out to us if you have questions. And if you're in the Austin area, we hope to see you at some point soon, maybe COVID depending. So thank you all for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it. Thanks again, Juliana.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.